Well, hey everybody, my name's Aaron. Welcome back to my second channel, Retro Hack Shack After Hours. Well, I picked up this PC this week at e-waste, and so I thought I would go ahead and take a look at it. I really need something that I can use to test out floppies because I've got to clean up around the shack. I don't have room for all this stuff, and I know that there are probably some bad floppies out there that I could get rid of and make some space. So today we're going to do a little bit of PC archaeology, a little bit of testing, and hopefully get things set up so that I can start testing out those floppies. As a bonus, you all get to see my brand new intro for the second channel here. So I hope you enjoy that because it's coming up right now on Retro Hack Shack After Hours. Okay, so let's take a closer look at this thing and just see what we've got here. So this is a bog standard case, and I'm very familiar with these because one of my first IT jobs was supporting and building computers in these exact types of cases for the place that I worked. It happened to be a business telephone company. And we use these for salespeople or anybody. We would just go get these cheap cases. I don't know what they were, like $50 or something. And you could build a pretty cheap PC to use around the office for $200 or $300. And I have many cuts to thank for these cheap steel cases. Because when you take them apart, the steel inside can be sharp. It can have barbs. And I got lots of cuts in those days from working on these machines. Now, of course, as you can see, one of the things that intrigued me right away was the sticker, really large sticker here that was put on the outside of this cheap standard no-name case here. And it's called, the company apparently is called XETA with an X, XETA Corporation, and then it has expert down here. And I didn't find much on XETA Corporation, but I did find this XETA Technologies Inc., which is based in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, founded in 1981. So if this is the same company, then this thing came all the way from Oklahoma. And when I cross-reference the XETA Corporation or XETA Technologies with this thing, which is called Expert or has an Expert sticker on the outside, the trademark office says that Expert was trademarked by this XETA Corporation or XETA Technologies. And what apparently this relates to, and I assume this is what this is it says electronic telephone call accounting apparatus, or units for hotels and hospitals. So that tells us a lot right there. A call accounting system will basically monitor the calls that go out through a business telephone system. And then it will track like who dialed the number, what number they dialed, how long they talked for. So back in the day, that would have been really important because you got to remember, we live in different times now. Back then, every call or every long distance call, especially that you made, cost money. And so if you had a big corporation, a big portion or some portion of your budget would have to be allocated towards making especially long distance phone calls, if not phone calls in general. So, you know, you may charge different departments, like the sales department might make more long distance phone calls, for example, than some other maintenance department or something. And so you would charge a portion of what you were paying for your business telephone system and for those long distance calls, you would charge those back to the sales department in for the ones that they made instead of just charging everybody the same, if that makes sense. So a call accounting system was really important back in the day when you were paying a lot of money for making telephone calls from your business. Are you paying a lot of money for PCB manufacturing? Then you might want to take a look at the sponsor of this episode, PCBWay. PCBWay offers inexpensive PCB manufacturing and a whole lot more. Need assembly services? No problem. They can do front side, back side, through-hole components, you name it. They also offer 3D printing, CNC milling, and more. So check out PCBWay for your next project, and I thank them for their support of the Retro Hack Shack. So now let's take a little bit of a closer look at this thing. Before I open it up, like I said, bog standard case that would have been used back in the 386, 486, maybe even up through the Pentium era. This one is a mini, I don't think it's a baby AT, right? This is a mini AT. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but 2 big bays, 1 little bay. I think that's a mini AT system, mini AT tower. And it could have, we'll have to see when we power this up, but it could have a 7-segment display that shows what frequency this thing's running at behind here. It might not. We'll find out in a second. And other than that, it's pretty standard. Power switch. Now this must be an AT system because it's not a momentary switch. It's actually a mechanical switch, but it's got a turbo button, a reset button, and a lock mechanism on the front, and just one 3.5-inch drive. On the back here is where things get interesting, and it's actually what convinced me to buy this at eWaste. Is we've got these little crossover cables here between, I assume there's cards back in here. I think I don't know, there's some holes there or something. So yeah, I'm really curious to see what these crossover cables here for these serial cables are for. They look like 9-pin D-sub connectors. So yeah, I'll have to see what that is, but that would kind of be in line with the call accounting system. And then down here, we've got 2 more serial ports. It looks like here, there's a modem and there is a video card. So just that configuration of things is really interesting to me. All right, let's take the lid off this thing. Maybe. There we go. Let's see what we've got inside. At first glance, it looks to me like this motherboard has 2 serial connectors on the motherboard, and then those are being routed through these crossover cables for some reason, and then back onto this other board down here where those other 2 serial ports are. So this is a bit of a mystery. I don't know why they did this. I don't know if this was some sort of security thing, or it's really kind of odd the way that they did this. They also have the reset switch is hooked up, it looks like, directly to this card. And then this switch is hooked up to the motherboard, kind of like where the turbo switch would be. So yeah, I'm going to have to do a little bit more digging here, but the way that this is configured is non-standard, to say the least. So this must be for the call accounting system that they had set up on this thing. Here's the model of the motherboard nicely. This is a TN or Tyan computer core board, and it looks like it's set up for 100 megahertz Pentium. So maybe this was a little bit later than I thought. This might actually have a Pentium processor in it. I thought it was probably a 486, but I guess we'll find out in a minute. I can also see down in here that there is 3 slots for memory, which is nice. And it looks like some extra slots back there, maybe for cache, depending on what processor you're using. And it looks like this also accepted an older style ATX connector, as well as what this is using, which is an AT power supply. It's going to be too dark down in there for me to show you. Maybe you can see it down in there. So yeah, this is using an AT power supply, but it looks like you could have used an ATX as well. And on this particular motherboard, there are 4 ISA slots and 4 PCI slots. So this is a good kind of middle of the road, just at the end of the AT area, heading into the ATX area of motherboards. So I think what I'll do next is I'm just going to test the 5 volt and the 12 volt rails for shorts, just to make sure that the power supply or anything connected to the board currently doesn't have a dead short on it. 12 volt looks okay. And, ooh, that's not good. Is that really a short, or is that a bad capacitor? So with everything disconnected, just the power supply now is the only thing that could be causing this. I'm still getting 20 ohms, which is enough on my meter to have it indicate a short. But at least I know that that short or close to a short wasn't coming from the motherboard or any of the components. If it's anything, it's coming from the power supply itself. Okay, I've got a donor power supply here from another system that I took apart at some point and saved the power supply from. This one, when I test for for continuity on the 5-volt rail, you can see there's a capacitor in there, and it must be working correctly because the resistance increases or decreases depending on how I have the connections connected, but that changes because it's charging up the capacitor. 12-volt, same thing. You can see it's going up, up, up in resistance there because it's charging the capacitors inside the power supply. So that is not a dead short. So let's just see. I want to make sure that this one actually works, and maybe we'll just do a quick swap of the power supplies, and I can put this as this other one as one to fix later on. Let's just test the voltages here. 5.168 volts on the 5-volt line, 12.04 on the 12-volt line. So this is a good replacement AT power supply. So let's get this switched out. I'm sure most of you have probably worked on these cases in the past, but if you haven't, the power switch is kind of hard to get to. It's located up here, and the drives are actually in the way. So usually there's some sort of mechanism. In this case, there was 2 screws up here holding on this bay, and then I should be able to just slide it back and take it out. And I kind of can. 3.5-inch drive doesn't want to go through. There we go. There we go. Now I can get to the switch and disconnect it. All right, so about an hour later, I've got the power supply. I forgot how painful those AT power supplies were to change out in this era of computers. But so now I think I've got everything back together. So this will be the first boot of this computer. Okay, the button didn't pop back out. It's a little sticky. But it does seem to be booting up. But I'm not getting anything on the display. Whoop, there, the button just popped back out. The 7-segment display is working. It says 500 on it, but I'm just worried that I'm not getting anything on the display here. I'm not getting any lights on the keyboard, so I'm going to try a different keyboard. It was time for some more troubleshooting. I didn't want to take everything out of the case just yet. I was hoping that it would be something simple. So the first thing I did was I tested the rest of the power rails, and they all seemed to test fine. Then I took the coin cell battery out because I found that somewhere around this era, some motherboards would error out if there was a dead battery in place. And this one actually tested fine. It still had 3 volts on it, which was quite surprising. That didn't make any difference though, so now it was time to really start disassembling and removing potential problems. So I took out all the cards. This is a fairly standard troubleshooting step, as these cards of course could have shorts on them or whatever could be causing the system not to boot, so I took them all out. Here's a closer look up of that special card that was in here. It seems to have a lot of relays on it, and it also appears that perhaps there was some remote reset function, and that's why the reset line was attached to this card. Perhaps they could reset the system, dial in remotely, and then reset the system if it needed to be reset for some reason. And that unfortunately made no difference at all. So it was time to pull the motherboard out and take a closer look. I was really looking forward to testing this board out because it does have a K62-500 processor in it, which was the fastest processor that this particular motherboard supported at the time. And it also has an AGP slot, which, you know, could be used for some accelerated graphics in this thing. But fortunately, this motherboard seemed to be toast. There was no postcodes at all when I used my postcard to test this board, so there could be a couple of things happening here. Either the CPU is bad, or perhaps someone tried to flash a new BIOS and that didn't happen correctly or work correctly. The board itself looks in good condition, so yeah, those are 2 things I can think of off the top of my head as to why a board would not post at all. Another one bites the dust. So it was time to move on to something else, and I found this motherboard that I also found at eWaste recently, and I've never tested it before, so we can try this one and see if this one works. I was able to find a Pentium 200 processor, which is the fastest processor that this particular motherboard will support, and I also found some appropriate RAM and got that inserted into the RAM slots. Okay, I did test this board for shorts before I hooked anything up. It looked like it was okay to me. I've got the card in that was in this computer originally. The video card is in there, and I've got a postcard. Power is hooked up, so hopefully we'll turn this thing on and it won't blow up and we'll see something good on the screen. Here we go. I'm getting postcodes. That's a good sign. There we go. This is booting up. Pentium SCPU at 200 megabytes and, come on, 60, well, more than 64 because of the way you count memory in bytes, but yeah, 64 megabytes of memory for sure. So I should be able to go into, yep, keyboard's working fine. So CMOS is working fine. So yay, this is a success. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump cut here. I'm going to put everything back in this particular case, including the hard drive to see if I can get that to spin up, floppy drive, all those things, and then we'll go from there. This is awesome. And unfortunately, that was the last of the awesome feelings. When I got this thing all assembled again, went to test the hard drive, I found that there was a video problem. It appeared that there were some lines on the screen, and when I touched the video card or moved it around a little bit, I could get those to come in and out. So something was wrong with the video card. And when I did a little closer inspection, it looks like the main chip on this board is starting to become desoldered. It's popping off those little solder joints one at a time. And so, yeah, this is something I could potentially fix with some hot air. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and grab a different video card as well. So another one bites the dust. Another one bites the dust. So I thought I would try this real 3D card that I found at e-waste. Some of you may remember this from your early gaming days. If nothing else, I'm certainly getting to test a lot of my e-waste finds today on this particular PC. And yep, this particular card works perfectly well. This is a real 3D Starfighter for those playing along at home, and even though it doesn't show me the video memory and it thinks this is AGP, the card seems to work just fine. Now that that's sorted out, I could try the hard drive, and yep, you guessed it, yet again, another failure. The hard drive did not work at all. Just for fun, I tried putting it in the freezer for a little while, which was a trick we used to do back in the day, or at least I did. Woo! And yeah, that didn't have any effect either, but it was worth a try. Did you have any weird things you used to do to your bad hard drives to try to get them to work again? Let me know in the comments below. And another one gone, and another one gone. So I grabbed another hard drive I had sitting on the shelf, and this one had a copy of Windows 98 that I had loaded on it after I tested this drive. So yeah, after I got that installed, this computer finally sprang to life. However, even after letting Windows detect all of the new system resources it found, including the serial ports, I could not get the serial mouse to work. In DOS, I could get the diagnostics from the Qt Mouse program to detect the COM ports, but I could get no signaling on those ports. So unfortunately, there must be something wrong with the UARTs on this board. Another one bites the dust. Hey. Fortunately, this board is late enough that it did have a PS2 header on the board that I could tap into. So I went in my grab bag and found this old PS2 to USB converter, snipped off the wires from the converter board and attached those to the appropriate header pins and got that installed. And what do you know, we finally have a working mouse on this system. Yay, the mouse is working. Woo! After that, I installed a Sound Blaster Live card because you need sound with Windows. Yes! Sound Blaster is working. So we got sound. That's awesome. I also installed a cheap LAN adapter so that I could get this thing attached to my network. This is why there's two reasons I love this monitor, by the way. The first one is it's beige. It's a beige LCD monitor. And it has that little auto adjust feature, which moves things around to fit automatically. It's like genius. And look at how nice that looks, finally. And this says 12:19 a.m. There's no way it's 12:19 a.m. 2:25, that's what time it is, 2:25 in the morning. So, all right, all this just to get Windows 98 set up. I'm going to bed. I'm glad I got this working finally. So I've got a working video card, working Sound Blaster, working LAN adapter, so I can access files over the network if I need to. All of that just to get this thing running Windows 98, which I don't even really need for what I want to do with this for the main purpose. But I just wanted to go through the process of getting everything set up. And now I've done that. And now I'm talking and talking and talking. So All right, I'm going to bed, and tomorrow I will work on some old floppy drives. Good night, Windows 98. I'm glad it's now safe to turn off my computer.
1 week later.
Well, as you can see, things are a bit of a mess right now. Here's what's happened. I was able to get Windows working on this machine. I was able to get the sound card, the video card, all that stuff working great on Windows 98. However, I wanted to repurpose this box to run DOS and to be able to test all kinds of floppies on it. That was my plan anyway. And I needed DOS for that. And well, I got to a certain point and DOS just wouldn't load anymore. So I've spent the past week struggling with this box, trying to figure out why it wouldn't load DOS, why it wouldn't work with CF cards, why it wouldn't work with regular old hard drives. It just suddenly stopped working. And of course, the 2 serial ports were also not working on this particular motherboard. So I got to a point where I just gave up on the motherboard that's in here as well. So it can run Windows 98. That's great, but that's not what I'm after right now. So I think what I'm going to have to do is stop this project here and then come back when I can find a few more motherboards to test and finally get this machine up and running with at least 3, or maybe I'll find a bigger case and put 4 floppy drives in there, and then I'll be able to really test out any disk and hopefully create any disk type that I need. So I'll probably do a follow-up video on that. In the meantime, I found another interesting board at eWaste recently, and it's this one here. It has this very interesting ISA card that fits over here, and I've never seen anything quite like it. It has its own ROM. It's got a crystal chip, which looks like it would be for a sound card. Otherwise, it's kind of an all-in-one board and looks to be around the 486 era. So I'll do a follow-up episode on this board in a coming episode, and perhaps a follow-up episode on building the rest of this disk tester machine. All in all, I replaced everything in this machine from when I got it, except for the case and the floppy drive. So I replaced almost everything in here, including the power supply. I mean, really nothing worked. And sometimes that's just the way projects go. And I had a great time playing with it, but it did take quite a while to work through some of the bugs and issues and test different things. I really struggled with some of the things on this machine, and it took a while to get this episode out. Speaking of episodes, I want to thank all my patrons who make these episodes possible. And also, if you're interested in 486 type machines or Pentium era machines like this, you may be interested in an episode I did where I talked about the full tower PC and tested everything in there and actually got that one up and running and was able to play some pretty cool games. I think there was 2 episodes in that series, and I will link them up above over here. And I look forward to seeing you in that video next.
End of line.